We're back with The Art of Fantasy. I think this is the fourth time. Close your eyes, draw in a deep breath, and conjure a monster. Now tell me, what do you see? Serpentine and slithering with razor-sharp fangs, claws like rusty daggers, and leathery wings with length of city blocks, a capering, slavering, eight-legged, venomous menace from Tolkien's fire-breathing Smog to the gargantuan kaiju spawned from the waste of nuclear tests, or the distinctly smaller but equally destructive goblin or gremlin. From the gothic horrors of Dracula and Frankenstein to the chimerical creatures traipsing through the pages of medieval bestiaries, monsters can take many forms and appearances. Whether dormant in the lightless dread at the depths of the ocean, or menacing us from the skies above, in remote mountain caverns, or as close by as just underneath our beds. We have long been terrorized, and traumatized by the monsters of well-known lore and legend. Revered, reviled, sinister, sacred, monsters lurk in every corner of the fantastical landscape. Every culture has its own cursed compendium of monsters, and each of these fiends reveals its own story about what torments or frightens us. For these creatures are essentially the manifestations of our biggest fears. The inclusions of monsters in our stories is one tool we have to process and examine these fears. The word monster has origins in the Latin word monstrum, which itself derives from monere, to warn. The word's etymological roots also point to that which reveals, and certainly much can be revealed about a society in looking to what it is that they deem monstrous. These creatures are a window into our darkest prejudices and phobias. When we examine our monsters, we cast a mirror upon our fears and desires to see the monstrous materialized in the reflection. When we gaze upon the grim visage of Frankenstein's creation, we grapple with questions about life and death. We try and think critically about the unchecked advancements of technology and the breakneck societal changes that result. Though Godzilla has come a long way since its genesis in 1954, it originally represented a powerful avatar for the horrors of nuclear weapons and those who wielded them. And Christians in medieval Europe were concerned about temptation and pleasures of the flesh, and believed that giving in to carnal desires opened the door for the demonic. Well, for some, I think you could take the medieval part of that out, and the Europe. And certainly everywhere in the world, a tale or two can be found where the monster is calling from within the house. Or to speak plainly, the monster we fear, in the instances, is that which is already within us. Generated by our own repressed dark psychology. How did it get there? Where did it come from, and what does it want? Freud's early 20th century theories about the subconscious mind had a particularly profound impact on the boundary pushing surrealists who embrace the monstrous and produce powerfully disturbing images in their search for new modern myth, with inspirations taken from their own realities and nightmares to invoke the horrific vistas of alternate realities. Visionaries such as Dali, Jean Miro, and Picasso created darkly fantastical menageries of fiends and apparitions that stood in for the all too real menaces of racism, nationalism, and the violence of fascism. Today, this fascination with the wicked, the abominable, and the monstrous that has haunted us since the time of our ancestors has not lessened its ghastly grip one iota. We are powerless to resist monsters and their stories. And though most of the creatures from days of yore no longer literally terrify us, we're still inventing monsters to embody the energies of modern anxieties while we wrestle from the real world themes that underpin them. Most of our neighbors don't believe the streets will be overtaken by the undead with an appetite for human flesh. But through zombies, we confront our 21st century concerns, often revolving around the fragility of human society. The trolls that once lurked under bridges now prowl social media platforms, mythical monsters in modern disguise that relentlessly provoke and antagonize. And in a strange twist, don't some of the very best monsters foster a sense of empathy in us, striving to understand their motivations and attribute agency to their actions? We are putting ourselves in their weirdly shaped enormous shoes and developing a connection and kinship with that which once frightened us, which we once saw as other. Perhaps this is why throughout our lives, when we close our eyes and conjure our monsters and the emotions that accompany them, those visions continue to change and evolve. Contemporary artist Jonathan Barry paints vivid scenes from well-beloved literature and classic stories, such as Alice's Adventure in Wonderland, Peter Pan, The Wind and the Willows, Sherlock Holmes, and many other classics. In this work we see Wizard Gandalf in the mines of Moria when he confronts the Balrog on the bridge of Khazad-dûm. The Balrogs were primordial spirits who took the form of daemons cloaked in shadows, with hearts of fire, and who carried whips of flame. Yeah, I don't recognize the name. Guessing she couldn't get permission for a Hildebrandt version or Naismith. I do like, I guess I'm not, I guess like the figure work, I guess instantly kind of took me out of it, but the more I look at it, I guess I do really like the background. Following a formal academic education, the artistic career of Charles Lepac began with painting, flourished with the production of elaborate enamels, portrait miniatures, and jewelry. Later in life, returning to painting, drawing, designing, and carving, and architecture, he was, by all accounts, a very busy guy. In Lepac's La Tarasque, The fearsome legendary dragon devastating southern France has been tamed by Saint Martha. Charmed with her hymns and prayers, they are seen here on their way back to the city. What we don't see off camera is how the townsfolk, terrified by the monster, just kill the heck out of it. Much like the story of Beauty and the Beast, the monster is calmed by a feminine influence and then attacked when brought back to civilization. Not entirely apparent from this painting, La Tarasque was said to have a lion-like head, a body protected with a turtle-like carapace, 6 feet with bear-like claws, and a scaly serpent's tail. I suppose we can allow Lepuc a bit of license. Ambitious, unwielding, and utterly original, the dedication of radical visionary poet and painter William Blake to his craft can be ascertained in even a second's blinking glimpse at a single canvas. Drawn to grand themes reflecting his deeply held beliefs about humanity's moral and spiritual decline and the pervasiveness of evil and oppressive forces, his works were energized by his comprehensive biblical reading, along with mythology, Milton, and other literature, but also echoed in the study of art history. The Great Red Dragon paintings are a watercolor series painted between 1805 and 1810, depicting the Great Red Dragon in various scenes from the Book of Revelation. In a spectacular sequence representing Christian faith and the battle between evil and good, Blake depicts the 7-headed and 10-horned dragon as the devil, while the creature emerging from the sea also has 7 heads, 10 horns, and wielding a sword and a torch, or a welding sword and a torch. N.C. Wyeth was a star pupil of Howard Pyle, followed the master artist's principles and precepts almost religiously, and went on to spend much of his life and career as one of the best-loved illustrators of his day. Renowned for his illustrations of a long shelf of classic literature, Wyeth's vibrant imagery, rich decorative color, and dramatic command of visual narrative brought the pages of Treasure Island, Last of the Mohicans, and Robinson Crusoe to vivid life, along with Thomas Bulfinch's Legends of Charlemagne seen above. Wyeth's valorous characters created prototypes of our American heroes today. And no illustrator of the Golden Age had a wider influence on the world of art than he did. Written during the 8th century CE, the English poem in the tradition of Germanic heroic legend called Beowulf is to Anglo-Saxon civilization what the Iliad is to the Greeks. In this work by British painter and illustrator John Henry Frederick Bacon, we are treated to a rendering of what is likely the poem's most memorable creation, the first and most terrifying monster in English literature, Grendel, one of the monsters that Beowulf battles. Though he has many animal attributes and the grotesque monstrous appearance of an ogre, Grendel seems to be guided by impulse and sensibilities that almost appear human. Envy, resentment, anger, dwelling in misery. Among the banished monsters, it's possible he is not a demon or supernatural entity at all. Perhaps Grendel has been vilified as the other, demonic representation of someone outside the tribe. Either way, when you kill and eat your victims, the hero is probably not going to pause in his quest to suss out whether you're a murderous beast or a badly behaved human outsider. He's just going to rip your arm off and vanquish you. It must have been fate, or the stars aligning, or any one of those flowery phrases, a magical happenstance that our favorite fantasies contain. Born 11 days apart on opposite coasts of the United States, Leo and Diane Dillon met, competed artistically, and eventually fell in love, while attending Parsons School of Design, each aspiring to a life of art after their marriage in 1957. The artists initially pursued separate careers in illustration before recognizing their strengths were collaborative in nature. In an effort to work in a particular style that they both could master, they symbiotically and seamlessly melded their personalities and styles into an entity that they came to refer as the artist. The resulting effect of strikingly original and sumptuous beauty was a seamless amalgam of both their hands. The creators of fabulous science fiction and fantasy scenes based on the stories of Bradbury, Ellison, and others. The Dillons have won numerous prestigious awards for their book jacket illustration in the fields of history, children's fantasy, classic literature, folktales, and contemporary fiction. Yeah, I don't think this is very representative of their work, though. They're featured quite heavily in a couple of art blogs I used to follow. I think both in 70s sci-fi art and sheer inspiration. Does not seem to be their usual style. It's a lot more normal looking, I guess. At least the ones I remember always getting showcased were just very typically bizarre renditions. American illustrator Joseph Clement Cole was renowned as a vividly imaginative master of the pen and ink medium. Capable of marvelous delicacy and great boldness in his dramatic, dazzling strokes. Cole's illustrations hail from The Lost World, a science fiction fantasy novel by British writer Arthur Conan Doyle, published by Hodder and Stoughton in 1912, centered on an expedition to the Amazon basin of South America where prehistoric creatures continue to survive. Led by Professor Challenger, the explorers confront all manner of peril and dinosaur horrors. Particularly striking is a fearsome pterodactyl crawling into the chasm. Well, we may know French poet and playwright of the Romantic movement Victor Hugo as the wordsmith responsible for Les Miserables and The Hunchback of Notre Dame. You might be surprised to learn that he was a brilliant artist who produced more than 4,000 experimental and enigmatic drawings during his lifetime. Originally a casual hobby, drawing became his sole creative outlet during the time of his exile. Labeled as a traitor for his outspoken political views during the reign of Napoleon, Hugo was forced to leave his homeland and did not return to Paris for 15 years. Having transferred to his art the creativity that had until that time found expression in literature, Hugo doodled brooding landscapes and somber fantasies of castles and medieval towers, alongside grotesque figures from folk tales and legend on a small scale, typically in dark brown or black pen and ink wash, sometimes with hints of white, but rarely with color. Remarkably adept at his hobby, the results of Hugo's talents were later remarked upon years later by Van Gogh as astonishing things. Originally a painter for the shogun, Kano Hogai made efforts to innovate Japanese-style paintings, boldly pioneering the Nihonga art style of painting that reframed existing ink and calligraphy techniques and experimented with the depth and three-dimensional perspective of Western art conventions. His art eventually evolved into novel, eerie images meant to satisfy both Japanese and Western audiences. Hogai is perhaps best known for his paintings of dragons, birds, and Buddhist gods. In this scene, we observe two powerful dragons intertwined and playfully fighting in the sky. In Jacobo de la Varenne, The Golden Legend, St. George slew the dragon that was menacing the people of Selene, saving a princess in peril. The story goes that the dragon originally wrested tribute from the villagers, and there was no longer enough livestock or trinkets to appease it. They began resorting to a human offering once a year. In this dramatic painting by Peter Paul Rubens, St. George and his steed symbolize the triumph of good over evil. Christian hero riding a spirited white stallion and brandishing the sword against the evil foe. Behind the horse and rider, the princess looks on next to a lamb, ostensibly representing innocence and purity and the church and all that jazz. English painter and book illustrator Thomas Cooper Gotch initially painted natural pastoral settings before settling into the romantic pre-Raphaelite style, for which he is best known. Gotch explained the child in the world as a young person standing alone, unafraid, in the innermost horridest home of the dragon, called the world, who was powerless against her innocence. The model for the child was his daughter Phyllis. Apparently Gotch was fussing with his work quite a bit, as different versions exist in oil, pencil, and watercolor. The oil version was exhibited at the New Gallery in 1895 to mixed reviews. Some critics thought the dragon sillier than it was scary. I don't think they're wrong, but not all monsters are terrifying to behold, and not even all of them mean to frighten us. I think that's a good lesson for a human of any age. Multiple award-winning artists specializing in science fiction and fantasy illustration, the works of Vincent D. Fate span the remote frontiers of astronomical art and aerospace illustration. Space chases, futuristic supermen, machines born of dreams or nightmares, astonishing voyages of the imagination to the edge of the cosmos, and vast worlds inhabited by incredible beings, light years away from planet Earth. Some of these visions, however, live a little closer to home. DeFate casts an eye on one of the truly remarkable character designs of the 1950s science fiction movie genre, that infamous guild man captured by scientists in the Amazonian jungle, thought to be a missing link between creatures that lived in water and those that walked on land. His appearance is both fantastical and terrifying, and in Fate's hand rendered breathtakingly beautiful as well. Oh, okay. I was thinking that was for the one above, but it's the one opposite. But I was quite confused. But yeah, this does look more like a defate. I was trying to wrap my head around that. But now for the one on the left. Fearless illustrator of Russian folklore, Ivan Bilibin was a graphic artist and stage costume designer who was largely influenced by Art Nouveau, and whose work is commonly associated with Russian fairy tales. To the extent that we could say his work very much defines our perceptions today of what Russian folklore looks like. Seen here is Bilibin's depiction of a water-dwelling demonic creature found in the mythology and lore of Eastern Europe, the Volodyanoi, a bloated, cranky frog-faced old water spirit who, when angered, breaks dams, washes down water mills, and drowns people and animals. The surest way to rile the Volodyanoi is to upset the natural balance of his watery habitat, although according to legend he can be appeased with a knob of butter. I don't think any monster list is complete without our favorite, enormous, destructive king of nuclear waste spawn monsters, Godzilla. With his gigantic stature, scaly body, and atomic breath, Godzilla is basically a dragon from traditional fantasy art, right? Gobbling up citizens and scientists instead of knights and crusaders, devastating vast metropolises towering with glassy skyscrapers as opposed to castles and fiefdoms. Well, I think that Japanese artist Yuko Shimizu might agree. If her fantastical rendering of the King of Kaiju is any indication, vividly colored, boldly realized, and with striking details, Godzilla here is a towering sci-fi fantasy dragon viewed through a surreal American pop and Japanese graphics and comic culture lens. The hazy, dying embers of a setting sun sets up the moody backdrop and contributes to an uncanny sense of romanticism. In 19th century Polish painter Witold Puszkowski's golden hour portrayal of this fearsome beast is this dreadful dragon violently twisting towards an armor-clad foe in advance of an incendiary last stand, one which will either end with a barbecued knight or beast with a sword in its heart? Or is this merely a benevolent beast discharging a fiery belch, goggle-eyed with embarrassment? Whether we're quivering with terror or barely repressed giggles and femme-shaman, the artist's fondness for fantasy and fairy tale archetypes, combined with a keen eye for weird detail and mystical atmosphere, paints a curiously evocative picture of this mythical monster. Expressed in the languid dream of a somber, sumptuous palette and resplendent with atmosphere of emotion, the work of Jason Mowry trembles in a thrillingly familiar way, caught between the border of formal and fantastic. We may not know who these subjects are or what they're up to, but from the monstrous figures to the human characters that look just like us, there is something in their story that we recognize nonetheless. These strange, sentimental visions combine myth and legend, personal narrative and symbolic imagery in a visual language that speaks a timeless spell that bypasses the modern viewer's analytical safeguards and sings to something ancient and ancestral in their blood. Bolesław Biegus was a Polish surrealist painter and sculptor, best known for his fantastically bizarre and sometimes scandalous vampire as femme fatale style of art, featuring mythical monstrous chimeras, which symbolized a violent battle of the sexes. Won a large number of Polish artists working in Fin de Sicile, Paris. There he found a more kindred artistic environment in which to flourish rather than the conservative Academy of Fine Arts in Krakow, which had expelled him in 1900. Despite the academic blemish, with staunch support from the editor of the Paris Symbolist Literary and Artistic Review, La Plume, and membership in the Salon de l'Automne, Biegus firmly established himself among the Parisian avant-garde and artistic community of the time. One gets a sense that Forrest Rogers is an artist who has experienced firsthand both joy and despair of mermaid singing, has felt the euphoric incandescent flutter of angel wings, held the literal hand of the dark night of the soul, and maybe even danced a tango with a prehistoric skeleton or a luminous beam of starlight. How else would this artist instinctively know how to sculpt the ineffable, transcendent, the staggering unbelievable into such graceful and dynamic reality? His creatures, marvels of myth and imagination, monstrously beautiful and tinged with melancholy, seem poised at the verge, a frozen moment of fragile movement, as if they may any moment take flight and disappear with their secrets into the mist, or skitter close and whisper mysterious revelations. A person with care, take only what is offered to you and let the world go on, knowing that you have experienced a bit of the magic that made them. Well, continuing our tradition of being a bit off, it seems like we have just enough time to cover this intro for part 2, which I think we'll go ahead and do because given on how some of these parts have been running over long, might as well make sure we're able to get through it comfortably instead of feeling rushed tomorrow. The forbidden pursuit of arcane knowledge, dangerous voyages into unknown realms, or the search to unlock the secrets of immortality. These are the never-ending quests of curiosity that we tend to associate with fantastical tales and evocative visuals that accompany them. Seekers, saviors, magic and miracles, revelations, hallucinations, and sinister confabulations. Art history teems with daring adventurers of inquiry and mystery, from the nebbish antiquarian to the faithful seminarian, or the unexpectedly philosophical barbarian, can see these figures in fantasy art the world over, stoking the fires of our imaginations, envisioning their impossible escapades and enterprises. What is it that draws us to imagery evocative of dreams and magic, faith and philosophy, gods and demons, magicians and sages, prophets and priests, as outlandish, as otherworldly as these figures might seem. Their stories are a collection of dreams and imagination, observation of reality, and a profound study of humanity. Historically rooted in folklore, mythology, and religion from all over the globe, these archetypes speak a collective language of the extraordinary through a kaleidoscope of the fantastical. But they are also a reflection of us, both exactly as we are, for good or ill, and all that we have the potential to be. Where do we come from? Where are we going? What even are we anyway? It's kind of dipping into a style of hers that I don't really like. Through art, we discover pieces of ourselves and our fellow humans in the characters we encounter. We become sensitive to hidden marvels and mysteries hitherto unexplored, or that perhaps we had previously overlooked. Hearts become softened by beauty and wonder, receptive to new ideas and answers to questions we may not even have realized we were asking. May contemplate the mysteries of the sacred and divine, as does the shadowy subject of The Magic Circle by John William Waterhouse. Ruminate upon the unknowable essence of fate in the gloomy golden swirls of symbolist Jan Torup's fatality, or simply wax philosophical on the nature of beauty and horror as we glance between works such as Margaret MacDonald Mackintosh's Glowing and Gorgeous, The Heart of Rose, and Audrey Beardsley's rather horrid and sinister depiction of Vergilius, the Sorcerer. Transformation and metamorphosis, evolution and revolution. Art can lead to change, and the capacity for change is at the heart of being human. I believe we are drawn to these seekers and searchers on their perpetual quest to level up because we want the same for ourselves. When we know better, we become better and can do better. When the dream the impossible, hope for the unattainable, and imagine the unimaginable, take that first step on the journey of exploration and enlightenment. We are creating the most extraordinary magic there is. So yes, that does bring us to the end of our time today. So we will be picking back up with the first section proper in part 2. And yeah, that should be tomorrow.